Okay, good evening colleagues, and welcome to the first GARMS committee of 2021. Again, we find ourselves under very difficult circumstances with the ongoing national and global pandemic, but as much as possible can I wish all members and officers present and guests and any members of the public a happy new year. I'll kickstart, as I always do often, with the protocol for members. Given we are on online meetings, we will be familiar with them, but I will just refer to them just very briefly. And that's members are to have their videos on at all times and to put microphone on mute unless speaking. In case of any technical problems this evening, the meeting will be adjourned until resolved. And if any members lose connection, meeting will be adjourned until reconnected. And if technical problems which do persist, and the meeting is in quorate, the meeting will need to be abandoned until a later date. And can I also announce that the meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be available to watch and listen on the website. We do have a part 2 session this evening, colleagues, and so at the relevant point, I'm assuming we will all just trip off the current recording. And within our diaries, Democratic Services has circulated that second link for a part 2 meeting, which I would just maybe need to adjourn for a moment or two. So if we can kickstart into the formal agenda then please, which is agenda item 1, which is the attendance by reserve members. I haven't been told there is any, and so we will move on. Agenda item 2 is the declarations of interest that has been published, but is there any members who haven't indicated on the declared declarations of interest document wish to declare now? Okay, I note Councillor Marika has indicated that there may be a pecuniary interest due to business interests. Having a look through the agenda, I don't suspect that that pecuniary interest may be triggered. But should you feel that it is necessary, Councillor Marika, please indicate, and I can stop the meeting if you feel there is a pecuniary interest. So agenda item 3 is the minutes from the previous meeting from pages 7 to 10 in our bundle or online on our iPads. So can I note and ask people, unless they wish to make any comment, can we agree the minutes from the previous meeting?
Agree.
Okay, thank you. We now move very swiftly on to agenda item 4, which is public questions, and we have been notified that there is none this evening. Agenda item 5, again, where is petitions. I have been indicated there isn't any formal petitions to be presented, but members do have an opportunity to raise any petitions should they wish. Okay, none have been tabled at the meeting, so that moves, if I can, to agenda item 6, which is deputations, and again none have been received. And agenda item 7, colleagues, which is references from council and other committees and panels to ourselves at this forum tonight, again none have been received. So that moves us very briskly and swiftly on into application for the dispensation, which is on pages 11 of our papers, which is agenda item 8. Can I ask which officer will be presenting that? Will it be Caroline Eccles, or do we have Hugh here, Hugh Peart?
It's me, Chair, Caroline Eccles. Hugh Peart is unable to attend this evening.
No problem. You have tabled the document. Do you want to introduce it briefly?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to ask the committee to determine an application for dispensation. Barsha Palmer, and it's in relation to an interest of her husband's, which is also her interest by virtue of the legislation. As I'm sure you will all know, if you have a disclosable pecuniary interest, you're not permitted to participate in any business or vote on any matter in which you have that interest. However, the legislation does provide that an authority can grant a dispensation, and there are various grounds for that. In this case, it is otherwise appropriate catch-all kind of provision in the legislation. And just to sort of detail what it's about, Councillor Palmer's husband works for London Underground Limited, and that is a subsidiary of Transport TfL. So she is concerned as portfolio holder for environment, where she may have the duties which are to do with TfL, that there could be a disclosable pecuniary interest. And the reason for applying for it is that there is quite a degree of separation between her husband's employment and the sort of decisions that she might be required to make. So her husband's job is as a civil engineer, and he's concerned with tunnels and bridges, basically, and safety of those structures. And this is really not concerned with her, the work that she might be involved in, which she describes on bidding for an application of funds in relation to the council's highway network, or implementation, modification or withdrawal of specific TfL funded highway schemes. So on that basis, the officer recommendation is that there is sufficient separation between her role as portfolio holder and her husband's employment, that it would be appropriate to grant the dispensation, but that is obviously for the committee to determine.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. We've got quite a bit to get through tonight, so I'll just take that straight open to the committee for any questions of the officer based on the tabled document. Councillor Moshinson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, so I've recently communicated with you, Peart, on a similar question, and his opinion was that the government guidance suggests that a councillor should only not participate if that councillor has a DPI relating to any business or a specific business of that decision. In that respect, why is this dispensation required? Councillor Palmer, if she is deciding on matters that are not related specifically to the employment of her husband, can continue without a DPI, and where she has the rare occasions where she has to make such decisions, then she can respectfully step off.
Yeah, I understand that the monitoring officer will be writing to councillors this week about this issue and to clarify the guidance. So yes, then he will explain those specific circumstances and why dispensation might be needed. Whereas, you know, I understand your question, but he will be writing to members, and you will be able to obviously refer that back to him.
That will be after we make the decision here. So should we not then defer the decision here until we have the clarification from the monitoring officer?
Well, I suppose what I would say about that is that if you're granting the dispensation, it doesn't do any harm. That in the past you might have believed that it wouldn't have been necessary, then what you're looking at is whether if there is a DPI, you can grant the dispensation based on the separation of the difference between what her husband does and what her role involves.
I'm not sure I agree with you, and I'm uncomfortable with the reasoning coming after the decision will be made. Can I ask if there was previous legal advice that was given on this matter? Councillor Palmer has been portfolio holder for a number of years now, and how that advice has changed, that we now require to consider a dispensation and we were not required before.
I'm afraid I don't know the detail of what she's done in the past or what advice she might have been given. But this is her, attempting to regularise the position for the future to make sure that there isn't any issue about her having a DPI. You appreciate that it is a criminal offence to actually have a DPI and participate. So this is an attempt to regularise it. The committee may consider that there is no issue about granting the dispensation because there is a separation. Whether or not she has it is another issue.
And lastly, before I give some time for other councillors, do you know the level of seniority of her husband within London Underground? Obviously, it'll be very different if he is a member of staff and very different if he holds a position of control.
According to the report, I think it just says he's a civil engineer.
I've read the report. It doesn't say what level he is in the organisation.
I don't know, I'm afraid, Councillor. Sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Bardia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Caroline, for your attendance today. So, Chair, I'm just sort of slightly uncomfortable on a number of things because obviously Caroline is here deputising for UPIT, which is kind of her because I think my concern is obviously, we're deflecting some important questions being asked in the committee today. That's one observation. And I think obviously in light of, what Amir's mentioned, that she's been the councillor long-standing. So, you've been in the cabinet, so you know better in terms of what advice is, obtained or given to cabinet members and so on. But I think overbearing in terms of all the kind of arguments for and against, my little concern is that the fact is come to this committee and this committee is deciding on an issue which the public will have a great interest in, simply because we're just kind of 6-7 months down the line of one of the TfL projects, which caused a lot of debate and divided opinion and some strong feelings. And now trying to link that to sort of where this sits in that portfolio, which will be Councillor Palmer's sort of portfolio, I think. I think I'm just a bit wary, kind of trying to give this dispensation just because I think there's a strong public interest, and to be granting this in sort of as a retrospective decision or sort of thing. And as Amir said, I'm still not clear that if the fact remains that if there's no strong connection to what this spouse does, Councillor Palmer's spouse, and his seniority. So I think we're still not sure then why, in that case, why dispensation is required, because she will still be, I'm sure, she'd abide by all these sort of disclosure requirements in terms of her decision making or presiding over. So I'm just slightly uncomfortable actually trying to make a decision today on this. And the fact that UPIT knows a lot more about this and unfortunately is not able to be with us today. So yeah, those are the comments I wanted to make, Chair. Thank you.
Can I just come back into the office and I don't wish to question what your introduction, but I think you've used some terminology which is slightly confused things. I think you used the words monitoring officer, but we're writing out to everyone to clarify. I think the way I interpret that and understand the position to be is it's not clarifying the position, although we don't know the position. The position is clearly outlined within the document. I think because of the public interest issue Councillor Bardi has just raised, I think the monitoring officer will be writing out to people just to clarify the position around the interest, not necessarily bringing any additional information which could necessarily come to light should we make the decision tonight. Have I understood that to be the correct position, or is there information not presented to the committee this evening which could come out in an open letter to members, all members?
I think what QPIT will be saying is that the position is that you, in a circumstance like this where you would think, well, she doesn't have a DPI because of the separation, that in fact that would be the case. But then that probably is a change to how you've been advised before, and that's why Mr. Pitt will be writing out, because it is, as you say, slightly different from what you've been sort of told before. So in this case, yes, you might have thought that this was obviously not a DPI, but simple employment connection. There is a DPI, so that will be something that, and again, you can discuss. But I don't know if that really affects the current application, because this is just about sort of going forward. So unless you, yeah.
Chair, with respect, this came in response to my question, which was with regards to the position that Hugh Peart had provided me less than a few weeks ago. And I would be interested in knowing if the position has now changed, how has it changed, and what has changed that requires a DPI, not just for Councillor Palmer, because if the position has changed in the way that the officer now suggests, that any minor employment and any link, irrespective of how remote it may be, gives rise to a DPI, then we will be sitting here in an influx of dispensations coming from all members of the council, I'm afraid. And to receive that clarification only after we are requested to make a decision is an item of concern for me.
Councillor Benjamin.
You need to unmute, Councillor Philip.
I apologise. Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that much of what I wanted to say and raise has already been raised by Councillors Moshenson and Rabadia, but I am uncomfortable with this. I would have liked to have seen some further clarification as to how long Councillor Palmer's husband had worked for London Underground Limited. I would have liked to have known exactly what his position in the company is. My stance, and the reason why I'm uncomfortable with this, is because I think this goes to the root of public confidence. I think there is an issue about openness and transparency here. And I'm also uncomfortable with the fact that we're getting this application for dispensation now. Why wasn't the application made when she initially became portfolio holder for environment? The only thing I wanted to ask you actually is on the actual dispensation itself. I am assuming, because I'm looking at the wording of this, and it says in the event that a dispensation is granted, the council will be required to declare their interest in dispensation when decisions involving TfL are considered. Surely that should be TfL and subsidiaries are considered.
I don't know whether that's because it would only be TfL that normally councillor would be required to make decisions on. But yes, I'm just looking at the subsidiary companies. There are a number of them, but I think it's TfL that she's particularly required to make decisions about.
Okay, well, that's my observation.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there's no other indicators. So,
sorry, David. I think James Coyle, our independent member, had put his hand up before.
I haven't seen any indicate.
Oh, is it? I saw his hand up before, so I'm just.
Yeah, it was me, but the point's been picked up by the two councillors as we discussed. It was the two clauses and caveats in the document we've seen. I thought that they covered it off. If there was a potential conflict, then councillor was to declare that and to absent herself from the meeting. But clearly, if there's other issues, then that's slightly more extensive in discussion, I think.
Thank you, James. Councillor Assad, did I see you indicating briefly before? Shall I?
Yes, I just wanted some clarity on what's written here, because from what I'm reading, it says TfL has a number of subsidiary companies whose structure is out in Appendix 2, and Councillor Palmer's husband works for London Underground Limited, and that is one of 32 subsidiary companies of Transport Trading Limited. So I just wanted some clarity on what was mentioned previously in terms of subsidiary companies being included and only TfL. If you could just clarify that point a little bit more, please.
So I think it's always TfL, isn't it? That she might be required to make decisions on. It would be TfL rather than the other subsidiary companies.
So if her husband works for a subsidiary company, then why does she need to make this dispensation? I'm just a bit confused.
Is this the point about that there isn't a DPI in the first place, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, as I say, I think it's because the advice will be that even if you have employment and it's not yours, it's your spouse or whatever, then it's still your interest, and even though they're not, there could be, as in this case, a sort of different part of the company completely, that is still going to be a DPI, and that's why there is a need to ask for a dispensation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if I understand the position, Caroline, is this committee is not here to answer the question, why has this application been made sooner, given the position that the person in question has held for some time. We're not here to discuss, debate. We could have a comment on it, but it's irrelevant. We're only here to assess the application based on the information we've got in front of us. If people feel that there's issue, this should have been made 6 months ago, 12 months ago, that's for another place, I understand. That's not for us to pick over here tonight, right? Have I got that, Caroline?
Yes, Chair, that's entirely right. And we don't know, obviously, all the details of what's happened in the past, you know, and you can raise that with the monitoring officer, but this is about going forward to make sure that she has that dispensation. Okay.
So I think what I just want to make a couple of comments, really. And the first one is transparency is always welcome. I'm not going to get involved as when this application should or should not have been made, but transparency has been brought forward. I think we've got to use our professional. We've got a full suite of experienced councillors on this committee, not just with the council, but elsewhere. And we have to make a judgment. And soon I'll be taking us to Democratic Services to take us through the vote. But I think we've got, based on the information that's presented before us around the we know the husband and wife connection, we know the job role of the husband in question, of a different subsidiary to the actual department which funds parts of the council, and I think given the public interest in this, I think the transparency is welcome. We've also got within our documents, it's clearly laid out the Act. Our legal officers have made a view and have probably looked into this and are making a support of the application. And so I personally do feel there is enough information before us to make a decision. And so I think we're at that point where we can move to the vote. If that's okay, Democratic Services, do you want to take us through?
Hello. Yeah, that's absolutely
one
fine.
by one through usual protocol. I'm happy to kick us off if that's helpful.
Okay, so for would obviously for the dispensation, so or against it. Councillor David Perry.
Based on the information we have and the recommendation and support from our legal officers, I'm happy to support the application.
Excellent. Councillor Ali.
Your microphone, Councillor Ali, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the consultation and I've also myself read the report. I don't think there should be any issue, so I'm happy to favour the determination to give it dispensation. Thank you.
Councillor Assad.
I've also read the information, and based on what's been presented and the transparency, I would vote for the dispensation.
Councillor Benjamin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I vote against the dispensation.
Councillor Marika.
I will support the dispensation.
Councillor Mohenson.
I have not received answers to the questions I've raised. In particular, I want my concern that the details or the explanation of position will only come after the decision. I want that concern minuted For that reason, we will be voting against the dispensation.
And Councillor Rabadia?
Hello there. Yes, I will be voting against the dispensation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe that's all members of the panel that have voted there, and therefore the application for dispensation has been granted. So thank you, colleagues. And if we could ask our democratic services, any comments which have asked to be noted and minuted, if we could sort of respect that request, we will do so. So we can move now on to agenda item 9, which is failure to comply with actions recommended by the Ombudsman. And this is on pages 19 of our papers. And it is a very brief report, and I'm guessing protocol states it comes to this forum. So can I ask Beverly Kucher, who is in attendance, to introduce the report? And can I just note, members, the financial implications is very minimal, and so we probably don't need to have a larger discussion given some of the more sort of meatier items on the agenda. So can I ask the officer to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. This report is coming to you for information. It's required through the Ombudsman rules. The background to it is we have a site that is being dealt with both by Housing and Planning, and has been ongoing concerns for a number of years, and indeed we're still working on it. The complainant originally had the full response. There was a lag of time, as the report suggests, between 2018 and 2019, where it was unclear whether or not we could purchase the property or what could be done. And in the intervening time, there wasn't a good amount of communication with the complainant, so it went through to the Ombudsman. It is unfortunate that this crossed 2 service areas and wasn't coordinated properly. I think the report sets that out. And also, it also came through the Ombudsman's considerations came through right at the beginning of the pandemic. Unfortunately, the actions took time to implement. The apology and the financial, the £200 weren't paid immediately. And indeed, when they were paid, the Ombudsman wasn't updated. So it's, I would say it's very unfortunate. We have had lessons learnt. We have put processes in place so this doesn't happen again. We will identify clear leads across the directorates where situations like this happen again. We have made an apology in full. We have paid in full. And there is ongoing work on the site, and the complainant and the Ombudsman is being updated on that as we speak. So that's the report before you for information. Happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the committee. Do anyone wish to ask any questions on the report? Councillor Assad.
Just a quick one. What are the recommendations? What are the things that you've put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again? If you could just highlight those, please.
We will, when there are joint. If I go down to the recommendations on page 20, where there are joint investigations, we will nominate an officer from a service to take the lead and coordinate that. I think rather than have assumptions made that it will happen, it will be a much more proactive. And also, as a DMT, we will be introducing a quarterly update on any such Ombudsman matters, so that it keeps in the conversation going. So there's more monitoring of it.
Thank you. I just have one follow-up. How many times has this happened where we've had to pay out to someone who's complained about the way that we've handled something?
I can't answer that. I don't have that information before me. Because there are a number of different services that this may affect. The complaint, the report before you isn't about the fact we've had to pay out. It was the fact we took our time to pay out, and that's the lessons learned. There are occasions, I'm sure, that most services will support that, where you will get an Ombudsman saying £200 for the inconvenience caused, but I'm not the person, because I don't manage the Ombudsman complaints. I'm not the person to report back on that.
Okay, thank you. I haven't got any other indicators, so can I ask the committee to note the report as introduced by the officer and tabled, or not tabled or published? Is that noted?
Noted.
Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 10, which is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement and the Annual Investment Strategy, which is the Treasury Management Outturn for 2019-20 and our mid-year review for 2020-21 within our supplemental agenda. So I understand Dawn Calver, our Finance Director, will be introducing the report. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you, Chair. And I do apologise for being a bit late to join the committee tonight. I got stuck in another meeting. So as the Chair has explained, you have got a joint report tonight that covers the Treasury Management Outturn for 1920, the mid-year review for this financial year. I have explained in the report that you should have got these reports earlier in the year. It's been quite a challenging period with COVID, and we have been without a Treasury manager, and so we didn't bring these reports to you earlier on in the year. Hence why you're getting them tonight. So I think it's very, very important to emphasise to the committee that we have not done any Treasury management activity since we last reported to you in February 20. So we have taken on no further borrowings or anything for the council. So during the period of where we've been very difficult during the COVID period, and we have had some we've struggled to fill some vacancies. We have done no Treasury management activity, and our focus has been on using our cash reserves where required. So I think excuse me, sorry. So basically what this report shows you, I won't go through the report in a lot of detail because I'll assume the committee has read the report. So it does show where we outturned for 1920, and it does show our mid-year position for this year. And I'd say, just to confirm, we have taken on no borrowing. We are funding. We haven't spent as much capital as anticipated on our capital programme, which is primarily what we take on borrowings for, because there's been quite a slowdown in the capital programme over the last financial year because of the pandemic. So we have taken on no new borrowings to fund any of that, as we had previously anticipated previously when we reported to yourselves. So our debt levels remain at the £422 million. I'm not planning on taking any on further borrowings for the remainder of this financial year. We have sufficient funding in our bank account to get us through to the end of the financial year, which is what we will do. I think, just to point out to the committee, in the covering report to the main cabinet report, I am explaining that we are looking at exploring joining the GLA Treasury Management Service. So as I've explained, we had a Treasury Manager post. That post covers Treasury Management and the Pension Fund. The person left the post in April. And we have I have been able to recruit the pension fund side of the post. So we have a very, very good interim person that is working half 0.5 FTE for us. It's getting very difficult to try and find very good Treasury management posts. So we have the GLA offer a Treasury management service that I am exploring to see whether that would be, whether it would be better that we join that service and we get our Treasury management support through that service rather than trying to recruit to a post ourselves. What I will do is, we are exploring that now. The cost of the service is not a huge, it's not a huge expensive service. It's probably going to come out around about £50,000 per annum. So we will be able to manage that cost within the salary budget that I have for the post. So it will not put any burden on the council financially. I've explained in the covering report that what we will do is we will liaise with the, I'm trying to get signed up for that report from the 1st of April. It's always easy to sign up for these things from the 1st of April. And what we will do is I will liaise with the chair and the vice chair of the GAMS committee, and then we will bring this arrangement back to the GAMS committee in April.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you
for that introduction. I'll open that up to questions, and we'll start with Councillor Benjamin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dawn. I've just got two questions for you, and they focus in on the summary of outputs, page 39, 6, CFAS pilot membership project. Is the extension of the pilot membership of CFAS to March 2021, is that as a result of COVID, or do you not think it's appropriate to extend it further? That's my first question.
Councillor, can I ask, sorry, can I ask what page on the
page 39.
Page 39. Sorry, I'm having a slight bit of IT problem tonight.
Where you've got the key outputs at mid-year and quarter 3, it's item number 6, CFAS pilot membership project.
Could I ask for the paragraph reference number? Because I'm struggling to access the on the website, so I'm using my own copy.
I'm looking at the appendix 3, corporate anti-fraud team mid-year report and quarter 3 update.
Oh, I think that's not actually this report. I'm talking about the Treasury management report. I think, is that under one of your reports, Susan?
Now you've got me a little bit confused.
Sorry, am I?
So, if I'm right, the supplemental agenda starting on page 7, Councillor.
Whilst I get my act together, perhaps you could take other questions.
No,
I do apologise, Chair.
No problem.
Councillor, we'll go to Councillor Rabadia.
Hi, Chair. I've got a few questions, but I'll just ask one at a time so other people get a chance. So, Dawn, firstly, because I know you're explaining that the services are going to move, or you're possibly looking at outsourcing some element of the Treasury function. So could you explain to us, I'm not very sure, what does Treasury management actually entail that kind of needs to be done, and the bits that can be done in-house and the bits that can be outsourced?
Yeah. So what Treasury management primarily consists of is there is some admin functions around managing the bank account, making sure that we have sufficient money in our bank account to cover the council's requirements. So, for example, we always have to make sure we've got enough money in the bank account before the payroll goes out, paying our interest costs out, the investment income that we're getting. So sort of managing that bank account, managing the money, which is more of an admin role, which we have an internal officer to do. The more strategic element of the Treasury management side will be is primarily if we have to take on some borrowings to fund our capital expenditure. A big role of the Treasury manager will be sourcing what's the best way to do that. For example, is it better just to go to the PWLB? Could we do how are we going to do that debt management? Could we, for example, do it on some temporary borrowings? We've talked to this committee before where we did, a couple of years ago, we did a little bit of temporary borrowing because it was a lot cheaper. So it was better that we did that. So it's the more strategic side that the Treasury management will do, and it will be making sure that what we do complies with our financial regulations, the code, etc. What I am looking to sign up to the GLA for is that. So, for example, what I would like to get a little bit more out of from the GLA is be able to do a little bit more sophistication around debt planning. So, for example, if we've got some things coming up in terms of what we potentially might need some finance requirements for, we've got our capital programme, we have some schemes within the council, for example, the regeneration scheme, and I would like to do a little bit more debt planning about what's the best way, just to give myself some assurance that when we are taking on debt, we're taking on the best form of debt for the council, the most cost efficient form of debt. Is that, would it be temporary borrowings, would it be long term, what's the best place to go for? And I would really like to sort of tap into their service for that. So a lot of the admin stuff, managing the day-to-day stuff will remain in the authority, but it is more about that more strategic and for example, I will also be asking them, can they give us, we look at repaying loans, can we do a bit more of a strategic review of looking at that? So if that's more strategic element, I would like to benefit from the GLA service.
That's fine, and I know, like, when he comes back in April, we get better understanding of what's entailed. However, in terms of going with one entity to the other, so I'm not sure if any sort of work was done into say why that is the best option and what has been their track record of performance, which we really want to tap into. So what are those scenarios or criteria that says or that kind of makes you kind of make a suggestion today, not necessarily a recommendation, but I presume a suggestion at this point. Why that entity and none other?
Yeah, we do have. I think there are a lot of people out there that offer a treasury management service. So, but I suppose we could have gone, for example, we could have gone to our own treasury management advisors. So we could have gone to Link, but I do think there is an advantage of keeping Link as an independent advisor, and not going to them for both treasury management services and their independent advice. I think there will be a clash there. I think the benefit of doing the GLA is they obviously have been, they have been talking to us about their service. You can get an element of trust because it's being done through the GLA. They have a lot of local government experience. They are working with a few other local authorities. So we are not the only one that is signing up to this service. They are not going for a full blown, we want to get everybody on board, but they are looking to take on people. And a lot of other authorities are struggling, like I am, to try and recruit the Treasury Management Service experience that we need. And also one of the advantages is Link are advisors to the GLA as well. So you get some assurance that people that we know are advising the GLA as well. I mean, I could have gone out, Councillor. I mean, what I could have done is I could have gone out for, a sort of standard procurement exercise, but it is very low in value. It's because as I say, the service is based on our activity. It's coming out at about, and this this cost might change if it's an estimate because we're exploring. It comes out around about £50,000. So it's not a very expensive service. I could have gone out for a big procurement, but I was just trying to be thinking about this. We trust the GLA. It's not a significant value of service.
No, thank you. I'm sure we'll have a longer discussion next time. Chair, are there any indications, or should I carry on with my?
The floor's yours, Councillor.
All right, thank you. Okay, Dawn, I'm just sort of trying to understand the report and making sure that I've got clarity. So one of the issues I have is 11.4 on page 17. This is the West London Waste Authority. So in terms of the loan, so I know we've had this loan for a long term. So it seems to me that loan, although it's saying it's supposed to be reducing balance and so on and so forth, it doesn't seem we're receiving any money, and we seem to be accruing interest just to add to the capital. And it does concern me that although we're showing as an investment, it's not performing because all we're doing is accruing, and we're not even sure will we ever get the money back. So what's the exact position on this? It says it's now up to 16.1 million, including interest accrued to date, which does concern me, meaning we're not getting anything back per se.
No, I think we are receiving a payment from West London every year. I will check this way, but we are receiving a payment because this is why we have been able to maintain our investment income budget so steadily over the last 4 or 5 years, because the biggest, as we have used our cash balances, obviously rather than borrowing, obviously that means that we can generate less investment income. But because we have this loan arrangement with West London, that has helped us maintain the vast majority of that budget. So we are getting an income.
Okay, so could we please look into that? It's one thing accruing interest, but another thing, do we actually get it? Just to justify that. Yeah, I'm happy to come back on that. So just moving on to that sort of thing. So I think in terms of treasury management, you mentioned, so there might be a lot of layers which you're not familiar with, but the fact that we have to discuss this at this committee, one of the things that I don't notice here, and I was just wondering about, so firstly, is my understanding right when you mention investment in this report is actually referring to liquid cash we might have somewhere, deposited somewhere? Is that correct, my understanding? And then linked into that is, do we or why do we not have a situation whereby if we have, say, it looks like we're probably about 65 million sitting in the bank right now, why do we have no facility where it's actually offsetting against loans we already have, which are substantial, so to speak, to say then we're just being charged interest on 350 rather than 440. So do we not have any such products in the market at the moment?
Right. Okay. Oops. So I should respond to those for you. In terms of cash investments, yeah, we do generate that investment income that we do get does come from investments that we have made over a short period of time. So money where we have loaned out to other authorities. Okay. In terms of cash investments, and as I explained, the most significant chunk of our cash investment figure comes from the West London Waste loan. Right. Because we don't have a significant treasury management function like some other authorities do. So what you might find, for example, in other authorities, they will constantly be putting money out onto the money markets to loan. We do an element of that, and we do quite well for it. But we don't have 6 or 7 in our team who spend their whole day dealing in cash. Money goes out, money comes in. But we do some of that. And what we do is we tend to try and put it out for 2-3 months at a time. So what our treasury manager or assistant Shelley will do is she'll think, I've got X amount in the bank account. I'm not going to need this X amount of money for a period of time. We'll put that out on short loan to another borough, and we will get an element of interest in for that. So we get that interest in during the year. And then obviously we also get the money from the West London, the West London loan arrangement. In terms of using the cash in the bank to offset existing loans, the repayment of existing loans is something that we look at regularly, and it's something that our Treasury Management Advisors Link look at regularly to see can we refinance loans. Now, on the vast majority of cases is that the redemption fee that we would have to pay just makes that not viable. Because often what people will do is they will just charge us a redemption fee that is equivalent to the interest that they will lose if we redeem the loan early. But just to give you confidence that we do look at this, a couple of years ago, we took some borrowing on from Lancashire County Council when we took some borrowing because it was an incredibly low rate of interest. The council now are looking to call their money back early. Now, that's going to be quite an advantage to us because the PWLB rates have dropped. We will be able to refinance that money at a lower rate. So to give you confidence that we do that, we look at it regularly, but on the vast majority of the cases, the redemption fee that we would have to pay doesn't make it viable.
No, sorry, just to clarify, I wasn't meaning to say you should be regularly redeeming loans because I know it's an expensive business. It was just the fact that, I mean, are there no sort of facilities, even with the Public Loan Works Board as well, to say, right, if we have money, we have an offsetting facility to say, yes, there's 300 borrowed from you, but if when we have money, it's in a pot and you're doing offsetting, because obviously that makes a lot of sense that, we're trying to sort of find investment all the time when they spare cash, because we know it sometimes gets used up pretty quickly within a few weeks or months, but there'll be times when you have money sitting in for a few months. So I was just wondering why, if there are any products available against those lenders.
See, there isn't that facility available, so we can't kind of do an offset arrangement with the PWLB. But what we do with the cash is we do put that out on short-term investments to generate some income from that. So that is not just cash sat in the bank. It doesn't just sit there. We do try our best to loan that cash out for various periods of time, depending on how long we think we can feasibly do that for. So we don't run out of cash because obviously we don't want to do that. And that's what we do. That's what we do instead.
What's the loan rate at the moment? You said it's pretty low at the moment.
The PWLB, I think is around about, depending on how long you're borrowing for, I think it's around about 1-2%. I think we have put the details in the report. So
is it there? I couldn't find it.
Is it? I think they're in the. Oh no, maybe it isn't. It is very, very low at the moment.
There is multiple references of the PWLB, isn't there? But if I can help, but yeah.
It's roughly. Yes, you're correct, Jerry. It is roughly between 1 to 2%. But what I will do is I can just find it out because it does. To be fair, it changes every day. It's and it depends on how long you're taking your money out for because excuse me, I've got it here actually.
Is there an appendix with some current rates in?
No, because it changes every day, Chair, if I'm to be honest. So if I've got our, what we have a Treasury Management Internal Strategy Group where we manage our Treasury every day, every month.
Yeah.
So the ones from December that we had from PWLB, so for example, the PWLB for 5 years was around about 1%. And obviously going up to, I think it's 1.7% if you wanted to borrow it for a longer term. So, oh, here we go. So the PWLB certainty rate for a year is 0.67, 5 years 0.81 and 10 years 1.14. And what they mean by certainty rates is we get a slight discount as an authority from the PWLB if we tell them at the start of the year, do we have an indication of how much we are potentially going to borrow? So then there's no commitment to that. So what we do every year is we submit our capital, we submit the figures from our capital programme, say this is potentially what we will be looking at, and therefore we get a certainty rate. So they offer a normal rate and a certainty rate. It's only a couple of basis points lower, but it's still a little bit more efficient.
All right, Chair, any more indications? I'll go one more question otherwise.
You finish off, Councillor. I've got
right.
a couple of quick questions and we've still got to return to Councillor Benjamin. So over to you.
Okay, great, excellent, thank you. But in terms of the overall Treasury management, the way I see it while I'm sitting here, is that it's all fine to sort of, create this boundary or, the rules within which we need to borrow and, yes, you laid out a table which indicates the overborrowing or underborrowing and so on and so forth. So we generally come out okay with that. So obviously that figure changes. I haven't looked at it properly. My main concern is that, the key issue in this Treasury report that should be highlighted, which I never see, is this fact. Can the council ever repay this debt and when and how long? Because there is no point just piling on the debt, because from the looks of it, this is going to get higher in terms of our commitment and future plans. So I'm going to get lower. So while I've been a councillor, I've never seen that debt go down, and I can only imagine it's going up. And we've got no idea if or ever this will be repaid, because it seems to be like an ongoing pyramid. So as far as the Treasury report is concerned, that will be the most important thing to me, but I never see it. So can we try and understand that, please?
I think, it's quite a tricky one to answer, is this, because the council is always going to have to borrow to do some of these activities. So, for example, a significant chunk of the capital programme, and some of it is very, is health and safety stuff. It's not just schemes that the council is, it's not just completely schemes that the council want to do. Some of it is stuff that we have to do, health and safety. We do not get a separate funding stream for that. So we have to look at either applying capital receipts or if we don't get grant money, we borrow the money. So we are always going to have a requirement to borrow. I'm trying to think of it. It would be very, very difficult to repay the debt but to be fair, this is one of the things why I want to engage with the GLA, because looking at our debt profile is something I very much want to do. And for example, one of the things we're looking at with the HRA is a lot of our recent debt is being taken on, or as you can see going forward, is linked to house building within the HRA. Now the HRA fund the capital financing themselves, but one of the things we're looking at is how do we make, because the profile of the extent of borrowing is primarily related to significantly related to the HRA going forward. How can we look at what would it mean for the HRA in terms of repaying a proportion of that debt as well? So that is something that we're looking at. What I suppose I'm never going to be able to put in the Treasury Management Report is, right, we are going to make a commitment to pay this money back over the next 50 years, because I think that will be very challenging. But one of the things I really do want to start exploring with the GLA is looking at how do we start to address, what options do we have about starting to address the debt level? So I think it's a very valid question, and it is, just to give you some assurance, it is very much on our radar. And as we progress that, I'm more than happy to make sure that we put the relevant information in the Treasury Management reports.
Yeah, it will be useful, and I tell you why I raise this concern, because you obviously kind of emphasizing what I'm feeling or thinking, that it's next to impossible to repay this debt, and we are providing the service to residents and taxpayers. So I think I'm quite worried to be going down a path which is getting worse, not better, at every point in time we look at this. And also from a technical viewpoint, I asked the question, is the council solvent? And this is in the simplest form I've looked at it. You go 440 million of debt. Okay. On the balance sheet, we also have the pension deficit. Okay. If I add those two, we're getting close to £1 billion in debt, sort of thing. Yeah. And if I look at the assets, when you assets to schools and public utilities generally, to be honest, they're worth nothing because we're not going to sell them, and and so on and so forth. We've been a council which is selling off assets. So when I look at the overall picture, it sends a kind of shivers down my spine, because the concern to me is we're getting into a worse position, not to a better position, and that is Treasury management is about. I understand the technical nature of what you present, and I appreciate all the hard work gone, but I am sitting here as a member of the Governance Audit Risk Management Committee, and that's the first question I would ask. So this is a way of kind of presenting this, mitigating this, or dealing with this. I don't know, but I guess it's a collective opportunity to reflect on this.
If I can just respond to some of that, Councillor, I think you do make some very valid comments, and I think to be fair, this committee has said for many years they're concerned about the council's debt level. It's a high figure, nobody can deny that, but as I just tried to explain, we do need to take debt on for certain reasons. Just to give the committee some assurances that we have not borrowed since April 2019, and we have actively set a different approach to the capital programme, where we are only putting schemes into the capital programme that can either cover their own costs, a health and safety, and we've got capital receipt to cover, or we're getting grant money to prevent that debt level getting higher. And we've talked about this at the committee. So just to get some reassurance that we are looking at all our options in terms of managing debt. In terms of, I don't think you can't link the pension fund deficit into the revenue account. It's a different issue to the pension fund. The pension fund is a separate arrangement. So, and the deficit on the pension fund is something that is managed by the pension fund, and we have a strategy over the years. What we have to do in the pension fund is say that we have a strategy over 20 years as to how we are going to invest pension fund money to make sure that we don't have a deficit, i.e. if the pension fund closed tomorrow, we would have enough money within the pension fund to manage those debts, to manage the liabilities of the pension fund. So you really can't link the two together. And I think the other thing, just to, in terms of local authority debt, it is about affordability. Now I know there are lots of challenges around affordability, but it is everything that we do. We have to make sure is affordable within the revenue account. So that is one of our key criteria that we feel that is affordable within the revenue account.
Don, if I can just kind of come back to you on that. So I mean, I admire you that you're trying to portray a picture that doesn't cause panic, which is fine. I think you're frozen. Can you hear us, Don?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, great, no problem. So yes, as much as I appreciate that the pension scheme is a separate fund and it's managed separately and it's got its own assets, I am generally commenting on the fact that the pension rules require us to reflect the deficit on our balance sheet, which has nothing to do with whether it's revenue or capital or anything. That's besides the point. The fact remains that it is a deficit provision on our balance sheet to be, if, like I mentioned, if it was considered in conjunction with the outstanding loans. It's a huge figure. So, and just going by what we hear out there in the kind of public, the pension regulators' rules are that when the pensioner is in deficit or is about to close, the ultimate responsibility lies with the sponsor, which is her council. And we've seen numerous examples in the public or in the private sector, so to speak, whereby the pension regulator has to negotiate with the owners of the pension scheme being closed or in trouble, that they have to sort of bail them out generally, and those are the pension regulators' rules. So I'm looking at that perspective. So it's not a technical argument; it's just a simplistic argument, the way I see it. Thank you.
No, and I accept you. I hear what you say. I don't want to cause the committee any panic about the pension fund, because to give the committee some reassurance, our pension fund, the pension fund held by the LGPS pension fund held by the council is doing very, very well. Its valuation went up recently, so I think we went we're about 85% funded. We have a good strategy. We haven't seen a dip over COVID, so our pension fund is actually, the actual value of the assets is just sitting at, it's £960 million, so it's just under £1 billion. So I just don't want the committee to be. I hear your concerns, but I don't think that you can tie in the performance of the pension fund, which is governed very separately, to put no risk on the council, because that is the point of the pension fund strategy. But I hear your concerns.
And Dawn, don't you have some good news about the pension scheme? That was a few weeks ago.
Oh, we do. Just to give you some assurance, thank you, Councillor Perry. Are you talking about our award?
I am.
Yes. So actually, the Harrow Council team won the Pension Fund Administration Award Team of the Year from the Local Government Pension Fund Awards. So I think, considering we only have a small team of 6 people and we are managed in-house, which is quite unusual, that was actually a good achievement for the team, because we were up against some very big pension funds from around the country. So thank you for mentioning that, Councillor. I appreciate that.
Chair, we should thank and clap hands for them for doing a good service, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are you concluded, Councillor Bardia? And I can.
Yes, you can move on, please. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Benjamin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dawn, my apologies earlier.
No, don't worry.
I was referring to another report. The reason is because this particular item 10 is contained in the supplemental agenda.
Yes.
And that was the confusion. I've just got one question, really a request for clarification more than anything else, and that's with regard to paragraph 13.8 on page 21 of the report, which focuses in on the operational boundary and authorised limit. And I understand the difference between the operational boundary and the authorised limit. My question is, am I correct in saying that the figures given for 2019 to 20 are the actual figures, whereas the figures given for 2021, 21-22 and 22-23 are estimated figures? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the thing that concerns me is that when it comes to the difference between 2019-20 and 2020-21, with regard to the operational boundary, there is a difference of 50%. It shoots up from 448,272, which is the actual, to 671,483, which is the estimated, and a similar sort of increase actually for the authorised limit. Although I'm a little bit puzzled about that. But focusing on the operational boundary, why is there such a big percentage increase between actual 2019-20 to estimated 2020-21?
Because the estimate figure, so the capital financing requirement that the boundaries relate to, the estimate for just let me I'm going to get my years mixed up now, aren't I? Sorry. I'm just going to go back to my report. I think it is all limited. I think it is all related to us originally planning to borrow £100 million for commercial investments, because when we set our capital programme, we were planning as part of the commercial investment strategy to borrow £100 million for commercial investments. We have now stopped that policy, so we have taken it out of the programme. So we had that £100 million in there, and I think that's the reason for the spike up and then it comes back down, because we have now decided not to pursue that policy.
Okay. Am I right in saying those figures include the pension deficit as well? I assume they do.
No. These figures do not include any pension fund deficit.
Okay.
It doesn't include any pension fund. The pension fund is completely separate from Treasury management. So the Treasury management is linked to the because what you've got to try and think of the pension fund is it is not a Harrow scheme. It is nothing to do with Harrow. It's an LGPS pension that we administer. Hence why it has its own set of statement accounts. There is nothing in Treasury management in terms of for the pension fund. It has its own separate investment arrangement.
Okay. Well, I mean, the only observation I want to make is to share what I believe is Councillor Rabadia's concern, which he expressed earlier, that I think that there is a very significant spike, a 50% increase from actual to estimated. That's what concerns me.
And I think that's valid. I think what you will find is that because our plans, because what we set our boundaries in our CFR and what our plan is. Yeah. And because we had planned to do that activity, obviously it was reflected in our CFR. What we are working at now, because that has now come out of our capital programme, hence it will come out of our CFR. So you will see it come. So we've seen it come down again.
Okay. One final point, if I may, Dawn. My interpretation of 13.9, again, if you could clarify this for me, is when it comes to operational boundaries, there are certain categories within each type of borrowing, because from 13.9 it appears you've exceeded the authorised limit for one particular aspect of borrowing. That relating to the financing of leases for vehicles and machinery. My question is, are there any consequences of exceeding the authorised limit for that particular category of borrowing?
No, I mean,
so it's the overall thing that is looked at. Is that what you're saying?
The crucial thing, the reason why the operational boundary was exceeded was it's primarily a timing issue. Yeah. Because the requirement for the leases came in after we set the boundary. If it had come in before, we wouldn't have exceeded. The absolute crucial measure in Treasury management is the capital financing requirements, because that says this is what you are limited as to what you can borrow, CFR. That is the one that we cannot exceed. So we're always very under borrowed because we're using cash. If you exceed that, what it indicates is you're borrowing capital for revenue purposes, which is what you're not allowed to do. So that is the one that is the boundary we cannot exceed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't have any more indicators. I did have a question on the operational boundary, but it is for the mid-year review, so we can probably pick that up next time. Okay. But just on the lack of Treasury management, and you explained that in your intro, which has happened over the last 12 months. What sort of impact does that have on proactive Treasury management? What sort of figures, if you are proactive, I understand the reasons why we haven't, but what sort of impact does that have on the vast amounts of funds and schemes we've got going on? Are we talking a few million or per annum or what really? No.
The only impact it has had, because we have done no borrowing, there has been no impact that we haven't had, for example, somebody that's been able to secure us the best rate of debt. So we've borrowed at 2.1 rather than 2, which would have had a financial implication. If I'm being honest, we might have lost out a little bit on investment income, because I've only got one part-time officer who has been able to do some of those. We've got money in the bank account, we'll put it out to loan for a period of time. But to be fair, during the pandemic there was very little of that going on anyway, because so if I'm being very honest, if we've lost anything, it would have, in terms of financial impact, it would have been around. It would have been a little bit of a financial impact in terms of a little bit of lost investment income, but that is really the only impact. And obviously the other impact is that we were a little bit, these reports have come to this committee a little bit later, but I took that decision because I've got limited resource. I took that decision because we had done no borrowing activity. If I had done borrowing activity over the period, it would have been the wrong decision to make.
I think my question was just on a practical point, really, as to if you have someone in post being proactive, what sort of impact do they have? And it's You know, I think it's a sizable amount in monetary terms, but it's not going to be tens of millions. It's going to be low millions, isn't it? Really.
But sorry, I understand the question. I understand your question. Sorry, I may be misinterpreting your question, Catherine. I think you're right. I think what we are perhaps we haven't done as much of what we would have done, Rod, is more about that planning. And that's really, we've probably taken a little bit of a step back from that. But thankfully, some of our bigger schemes that are coming on board that's going to require more planning, we've got time to catch up on that when we sign up with the GLA, or if we decide that's the best thing for us to do.
Okay. All right. There's no one else has indicated. I wanted to try and talk about slippages, but we can talk about that next time. That's fine. So given time, we've given that a good go on that one. Thank you, colleagues, for your questions. The recommendation is to review the mid-year position for Treasury management and activities and the output position. So can we've reviewed it and note the report, please? Is that okay? Colleagues? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, if we move swiftly on then to agenda item 11, which is the information report. This is the internal audit and corporate mid-year quarter 3 update. We want to introduce Susan, or ask Susan to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. If it's okay with you, I will talk about the internal audit mid-year report, and then Justin will just do a quick intro on the carved internal audit report. So on the internal audit side, in summary, I'm pleased to report that internal audit have met or exceeded its performance indicators at mid-year, albeit this is against the revised plan that was agreed with the committee in October. It continues to be a challenging year in terms of undertaking audit work completely remotely, mainly impacted on the speed in which work can be completed. And this is reflected slightly in the quarter 3 progress update that is also included in the report. Now, there has been some concern across the public sector internal audit community regarding whether sufficient internal audit assurance will be available at the year end to enable the head of internal audit to provide an overall audit opinion, which of course is a legislative requirement. And I think a lot of this in other authorities, I gather, is because in some authorities, the internal audit teams have actually been redeployed through the COVID pandemic into other areas. And whilst we did actually help out in a few areas, it didn't impact on us significantly. CITFA have issued some new guidance on issuing qualified opinions. However, I am confident that we will be able to undertake sufficient work to issue a full opinion at the end of the year. Obviously, I'm happy to take any questions, but I'll now hand over to Justin to talk you through the carved mid-year report.
Thank you, Susan. Justin.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, all. Just really to echo what Susan said earlier, it's been a particularly challenging 6 months for the team working remotely. The very nature of investigation work is you have to roll your sleeves up and get out and about in terms of visiting, in terms of interviewing people when there's sufficient evidence. And that has just simply not been possible, which has been incredibly frustrating for everybody in the team concerned. Having said that, 10 of the 14 work streams are well underway, and 4 of the 5 performance indicators are being achieved currently. As I said, the main impact on our work has been this, the lack of interviews that we're able to take place. So at the moment, we have a number of cases that are simply parked and are waiting till such a time when we can press the button on those interviews. And also the visits as well, where we think there's something needs a visit, whether that's to 1 or 2 locations at the same time. We are building a process to be able to go to completely virtual interviewing, which at the present time, there are no authorities, certainly in London, doing a completely virtual interview environment. So we are testing that at the moment, which is one side of it. Obviously, we are able to run the interview from our side. We then have to make sure that the suspect and an interpreter and maybe a solicitor also has that capability of attending that interview remotely wherever that may be. So that testing will continue, and we are confident that we'll have something ready by the end of March. As you can see from the report, the covering report, some of our figures are way down on this time last year as well in terms of referrals that are being sent to us. So things have been incredibly difficult. So that's really all I was going to say. Obviously, all the information is there, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, I just need to thank you, Justin. I just need to remind colleagues that an element of this report is part 2, isn't it, Susan? And so if any colleagues or members of the committee wish to ask questions with regard to the content of that part 2, we do have a part 2 session which we're welcome to come back to and just open up for questions. But if colleagues could just mind that, given we're in a part 1 session at the moment. Councillor Benjamin.
Thank you, Chair. I was just actually thinking aloud as you were saying what you were saying as to whether any of my questions relate to part 2. I will just raise my questions, and perhaps if you feel it's not appropriate to answer the question at this stage, then it can be parked. Justin, I just wanted to ask 1 or 2 questions. You mentioned that at the moment you're undertaking remote interviewing. I know that in the past it's been said that whenever physical interviews are taken, they comply with PACE. I'm assuming that you're going to have difficulty with PACE when it comes to remote interviews. Is that correct? How do you get around that issue?
Sure, it's a really good question, actually, Councillor. We've done quite a lot of research on this with Metropolitan Police, the Crime Prosecution Service, and obviously speaking to our own in-house solicitors about the compliance issues here. There is generally an appetite by all concerned in the criminal justice system that providing the spirit of PACE is adhered to, so i.e. that any suspect has the right to seek legal advice and they're given their rights before they are then interviewed, then at the moment there doesn't appear to be a lot of pushback on it. So there's little case law at the moment in terms of cases that have gone through a system, and I'm aware that in terms of the police, they are doing remote interviews, but at a police station where that environment is in a particularly controlled environment. So nobody has done completely remote, where potentially you could have up to 5 people all in different locations. So the logistical challenge with this is quite tough, and obviously we are trying to develop this because we think that the longer this goes on, the longer we're going to have to find, the sooner we are going to have to find a solution. So I'm confident that that if we find something that's watertight, then we will roll that out and we will at least try and push those boundaries.
So what you're saying effectively, this is an evidential issue that's probably going to have to be determined by the court at some time in the future. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes, but the kind of the safe checks that we've built into our system with the people that we've spoken to are more than covering potential challenges. By we're trying to play devil's advocate and make sure we are covering every base.
Okay, I've got 2 more questions. They relate to Appendix 3, which is the mid-year report from the corporate anti-fraud team. There could be part 2 questions, but I'm going to raise them now and
page,
tell me. Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah. Just ask what page, Councillor.
Sure. The first question relates to page 39, and that's item number 6, the CFAS pilot membership project.
No, that's fine. You're in part 1 with that element.
Okay, fine. It's just an observation. I note that pilot membership of CFAS has been extended to March 2021. In view of what's been said, do you think it's appropriate that that is extended further?
Well, one of the main reasons it's obviously been extended is for the fact that all councils that are using it, I think there are about 30 councils that are currently in the pilot, have all had difficulties working remotely like we have. So potentially it might be extended, yes. As I said, we are now starting to be a lot proactive with using the system. So we're able to use data and to use bulk data matching rather than just single kind of searches of the system. So we are really hopeful that that is going to turn something up that we would ordinarily never have known about. So it will identify things that we would never have found using any other system. So yeah, potentially, to answer your question, it will probably be extended once again, just to make sure that people have got a good go at it, to make sure that it's going to pay for itself.
Thank you, that's very clear. And my final question relates to page 42, item 10, and that's the COVID-19 business grants. And correct me if I'm wrong, we are probably talking about significant sums of money here. Is this work stream going to be separately rated in view of the amounts involved in terms of risk assessment?
Sure. Well, I suppose to a large extent it does depend on what the work of mainly internal audit are doing, which they're currently doing at the moment. So I don't know if Susan wants to come in and say something about that.
Yes, Councillor, we are currently, as Justin said, we're undertaking the work at the moment to do testing on the grants that have actually already been paid. Yeah. And that is to provide assurance that we have paid out as we should have done. So each claim has been risk assessed by the team that have paid it out. And we are basically, if you like, going to provide assurance that that risk assessment was accurate and that actually it was the right thing to pay out that grant. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Marika.
I just want, because they were speaking about the business grant, I just want to declare interest that side, because I just don't want to commit myself on that. So I just want to.
You've switched your mic off, Councillor.
I just want to make you aware, Chair, that because of my businesses, I do know that the business management team is applying for grants at the council. So I just want to declare an interest on that. That's all, just to make a clear suggestion.
Yeah, I was aware of that. I think given the high level question that Councillor Benjamin gave, I didn't think it was anything specific, but that is declared at the outset of the meeting, and thank you for intervening again. But if you feel that you wish to drop off the meeting, that's fine, but I think you'll be okay. Councillor Moshington.
Thank you, Chair. Justin, you presented correctly that a lot of the numbers that we normally see at this stage of the year are very low, and I would expect them to be things like Blue Badge, housing applications, etc. How has the focus of your team changed in that period? What areas were you focusing on as you were not able to access some areas of fraud or investigate some areas?
Sure. So there was quite a bit of work that was done to support the revenues and the economic development team in, I suppose, fraud proofing their systems really when the grant scheme was open. So there was quite a lot of work done by Susan's team and my team to assist them setting up that process so that it was robust and it had lots of controls in place to make sure that we weren't a target for anything in terms of fraudulent applications and so on and so forth. But mainly there's been people have been working on cases that they're getting their cases up to a stage where they feel as though perhaps they have to park them and then move on to something else. There's also been a lot of planning with the proactive drives that are referred to in the report. So there's been quite a bit of planning for people to get those plans in place so that we are ready to go when we push the button. So we've got a couple of housing fraud drives that are now well underway that took a lot of planning to make sure that we were ready to go when the time was right. So so that's mainly what we've been working on.
Thank you. And with regards to, you mentioned assisting in the grants and frauds around that. I'm just looking at the table on page 45. Is that presented there somewhere, or should it be?
Is that the referrals, outputs and savings summary table? Is that correct? Yeah. Cool. So the bulk of our work in terms of supporting the revenues team and the economic development team was about helping them to establish their processes. So in terms of the investigations, any investigations we've got a number of cases that are live that the team have passed to us, and any that we flag as part of the audit piece of work as well will come across to us, which will be picked up. So possibly at the year-end report, you might see some more output in those, but it's kind of early doors yet.
Thank you.
Councillor Bardia. Your microphone, please, Councillor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few quick clarifications, Justin and Susan. So I understand you did mention that there were difficulties around sort of, achieving the speed of work or the depth level of work. But the report says that in terms of the work you've done, you are going to achieve the reporting projections to have sufficiently done the work as you wish to. Is that correct in terms of us understanding the report?
Sorry, Councillor. Yes.
Two nods. So yeah.
Sorry.
Do you want the officers to elaborate, Councillor? Or are you satisfied with 2 yeses there?
Yeah. So okay. So all right. So despite difficulty getting there, okay, that's fine. And we haven't had any new issues reported. So at the moment, we're just looking at I think I spotted 2 red flagged reports, and one we're aware of, the DAPO one. The second one, it says there's an appendix 1, but I couldn't find it. So did we get any copies of that appendix 1, or the item to agenda?
Is there, Councillor? It should be there, and it's actually a follow-up to a red report. So it's a red report that's already been to the meeting, to the committee, and this is where we've done a follow-up of it. Okay, but it should be in your papers.
I couldn't find appendix 1. I don't know if anyone else has seen it, because there is a small note that says it's appendix 1, but I mean there's a lot of blank pages at the back, so I don't know if it was meant to be there.
Appendix 1 of the internal audit report.
Yeah. Appendix, so it means appendix 2, I think.
Oh, I was just saying that's page 29 is appendix 1, Councillor.
Okay, let me just try and look at that again. Unless I've downloaded a previous version of the supplemental agenda, but I couldn't find anything different. 1 second.
Well, page
30, did you say that? Sorry.
Appendix 1.
Page 39, you said?
There was appendix 1 on page 36, which is the audit report assurance levels, but that's just, I don't know whether you'll be asking a question about that.
Because, no, sorry, because those descriptions.
I think you're talking about the part 2 item.
Yeah, it says, yes, confidential appendix 2. Sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah, so if we could pick that up. Oh, appendix 1 on that. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, that is.
I haven't seen one. I don't know if anyone else has. Confidential appendix 2.
Is there? It's in the private reports pack.
Yeah, we've got 2 private reports here, which is a follow-up action plan to the internal audit. Is that what you mean, Councillor?
Because I'm logged into 2 devices and I can't seem to see anything in part 2 in the private papers. I have refreshed it recently as well, so I can't see anything.
You're welcome to ask your question.
No, the thing is, because I don't know the contents of that, so
we feel it's straying into part 2.
Okay, I just wanted to know where the report was really, because I haven't seen it, or whatever is in part 2. My device doesn't show anything in part 2 in terms of the papers.
Are you in modern.gov? So are you in modern.gov
Absolutely, and I logged into 2 different devices just to make sure they're both kind of. If everyone else is picked it, it should be there.
You in agenda? Agenda 260121.
Is that in the private?
Yes. If you go to there's.
Oh, okay.
The title of the document is Agenda 260121.
Yeah.
And if you go down to page 53, are you talking about the restricted report there?
No, I haven't got that here at all. So unless someone wants to email that to me or something. Okay. There's only 2 reports. Yeah. My report only goes up to page 36, even in the private papers.
Okay, so that's probably that might be the PDF public report, Susan, mightn't it?
Yeah.
Well, okay, look, we're guided by IT here, as in if you can't find a particular document, can you recall your question or not?
Chair, if I can interject, 36 pages, Kanti, you're looking maybe at the supplemental agenda? This item is in the main agenda, not on the supplemental.
Okay, one second, sorry. I will try and sort of look at that again.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're in modern.gov, it'll be Agenda 260121. This report's in there, and it should, if you're in modern.gov, you should get access to this whole report.
Certainly, okay. Just give me a few seconds to try and extract it.
Well, we've had no other indicator. So while you're finding the report, I think I didn't have any particular questions. I think it's a very consistent layout as what we see when we come here, and I think we always ask for transparency, and you've come forward as to why some of the reports are not where you would like them to be. Obviously, we know why. We're used to very strong performance and reporting from internal audit and the anti-fraud teams, and so I don't have any particular concerns reading what I'm reading. You're doing the best of a bad situation, and it's totally obvious. Trying to work remotely on internal audit, I can imagine, is a nightmare and very challenging, as well as you, Justin, and your team dealing with very sensitive issues in the same environment. And so we're getting there, if you like. Councillor Audit, did you want to come in?
Yes,
questions so I can move on?
Right. So that's a late. So thank you everyone for helping with this. So because I'm kind of always expecting a separate report in part 2, and I didn't realize it was part of the longer report in the private papers. That's fine. Okay, so my quick question was, I think in terms of the red report, one of the things I think I noticed was that the one on the depot development red report is ongoing or is subject to review. So I think it's been a while since October. So just wanted to understand what bits are outstanding and when is that going to be final in terms of concluding whether the red report can be removed and a different color will come up there. So what's outstanding and how long is going to take? Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to answer that in part 2, please.
Yep, we can do that. If that you're okay with that, Councillor Rabadia.
Perfectly fine, thank you.
We'd rather give you more detail than a part 1 version. So if there's no more indicators, we can move swiftly on then, and just can we note the report of agenda item? Okay, that's great. I've had a few nods there, thank you. So we move on to our last item, which is within part 1, which is our internal audit planning process and consultation. Susan, do you want to introduce the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is an annual report that I bring to you outlining the audit planning process and to give you early consultation on the plan, basically. As well as the usual elements to be included in the plan that have been outlined in the report. I've also included some horizon scanning information that we've had so far, which has identified a number of what we term hot topics. which include equality and diversity, financial sustainability and climate change. And these will be considered, and it will be looked at about how we might actually cover some of these topics in Harrow. And I will be talking to managers when I'm doing the consultation about how we might actually include some of these hot topics. And basically, I'd just like to say to committee members that if you have any areas that you think would benefit from an internal audit review, or any areas that you'd like some extra assurance on, I would be very pleased to receive your recommendations, which will then be discussed with managers and risk assessed before we make a final decision about including them in the plan. Well, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions on?
If I can quickly just ask Susan. So, Susan, so is that an offer you're saying that we can email you anytime with our suggestions?
Absolutely. I would like it by the end of February, Councillor, if I can, because obviously if you do have any areas, they do need to be looked at and to see how they fit in with other areas that we're looking at and discuss with managers. So that would just give me a little bit of time to be able to go through that process, and they will have to be risk assessed. And if they don't actually, if they don't come out as a very high risk, they may not be included, but we will certainly look into them for you.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that. Thank you.
Could you also, Susan, just indicate maybe as a follow-up email to members of the committee, the sorts of information that needs to back up a request for an audit or an internal review?
Sure.
Any council is welcome to put forward any policy area or concern, but what sort of information you would like from the councillor in order as to why they're bringing forward that issue? I think what sort of information you would need to satisfy you to move to the next stage, not a trivial casework issue. I'm sure that's an important issue, but something which would form part of your workload, I think would help give councils a steer.
Okay, no problem. Yes, I'll do that, Chair.
Okay. And one of the issues you raised around equality and diversity may come up in one of the part 2 items anyway, because I've got the odd question on it, which I'm happy to allude to. So I won't pick that question now.
Okay.
We don't have any more indicators for that report. It's pretty self-explanatory. Thank you, Susan. And so can I ask members of the committee to note the report? That's great, thank you. I've seen a suite of head nods there, which is great. So item 13 is any other urgent business. I haven't been notified of any, and so we can move very swiftly on to item 14, which is at this point I need to declare that this is where we would be in the committee room, would exclude the press and public from the current meeting, thank them for their attendance, and then we now move into a part 2 agenda. So if I could ask all members of the committee to sign off, and you've all been circulated the link for the part 2 item, and so if we reconvene in a part 2 session in 2 minutes. Democratic Services, have I covered everything in order for us to sign off at this point?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, I shall see you in 2 minutes in the revised link.